Hi, everybody. I see a few participants being loaded in, so I'll just give everybody a couple minutes before we get officially started. So I see the popcorn popper has slowed down a little bit. So I will start the official part of the meeting and other people may join as we go. So bonjour tout le monde, je suis Pamela Eastfeld, la présidente de La Passe. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue au déjeuner de La Passe. Very happy to see quite a few of you registered for this session for people who are interested in joining our executive committee. I'm hoping that we will have quite a few more coming to join us here. Sorry, I'm just looking at my screen and trying to figure out how I can make this. I want to make this window disappear. So I have a PowerPoint. Sorry, before I start, I just wanted to welcome everyone and to mention that I am chairing this session from the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I acknowledge them as the past, present, and future guardians and caretakers of these lands. And I ask everyone to take just a moment as we go through this to think about where you are joining from and what that means. I am going to go through just quickly the agenda. I have quite a bit of information to get through. So what I'll do is I have pauses inserted in a couple of the slides, just so that I can look at any questions or anything that have come up. And then at the end, what I'll do is please, use the Q&A box for your formal type questions. Please note that I'm recording this session so that people can watch it afterwards. But at the end, if people want, I will give everybody the option of I'll allow you to talk and let you join as a panelist if you have questions or comments that you would like to make that you feel are more appropriate for that than for the Q&A box. So we'll go through the welcome, the terms of reference. I'll just talk about the terms of reference for the executive committee, fiduciary duty and what that means. EXCOM has a lot of governance and oversight responsibilities. I'll talk about what that means. Our code of conduct, I'll give the highlights of what is in there and what you would be committing to as you join EXCOM. Our role in strategic planning, the officers, committees, and task forces of the executive committee, EXCOM meetings, and some of the projects and issues that we are working on right now. And then hopefully time for questions and a bit of discussion. So, c'est une session bilan. Vous pouvez participer dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Our goal is really to encourage you and give you some information about the executive committee and its role. We have 11 positions coming vacant this year. That's, I think, the most we've had in a long time. And it's that many because a couple people got promoted, one resigned, another person is going into an acting. And so we have more positions available this year than we thought we would in the normal rotation. So, it's a lot of people. I'm hoping that quite a few of the current people will be able to come back, but will want to come back, but some of them will not be able to. And so I'm really hoping that we can interest some new people in joining us. And, if you want to make a difference in your professional association and for your career, EXCOM is a pretty decent way to do it. So I'll get into some of that as we go along. In October 2021, so almost 2 years ago, we adopted terms of reference for the executive committee. These define the role of the executive committee and outline how it operates to carry out its fiduciary and other duties on behalf of the members of the association in accordance with PAFSO's mission, vision, and values. It complements Article 6 of the Constitution, and they apply to the executive committee, including the president, the executive vice president, and the treasurer. And I see I have a typo here. It's now the general manager rather than the executive director, but the executive director or equivalent, and on all employees, officers, and any volunteers. So anyone who volunteers for a PAFSO committee, even if you're not on executive committee, you volunteer for a committee or an event, you are bound by the terms of reference. Fiduciary duties. PAFSO supervises and oversees the conduct of PAFSO's business and gives instructions to the general direction to the general manager, who is in charge of all of the daily business matters. Executive committee members are elected to the committee with the goal of bringing the perspectives of their different streams. We're elected according to different streams with 4 members at large. But remember, when you're coming to the committee, you're thinking about joining the committee, you are the representative of your stream rather than the representative for. And there's an important difference in governance terms. What that means is if you're a representative of, you bring the perspective and you are expected to have contacts with your stream to, if anything comes up that is particularly relates to one stream rather than another, we will go to those stream representatives to say, hey, can you find out from your contacts, from your members, how people feel about this? But at the end of the day, when you join executive committee, you are agreeing to put the interests of the whole association first. And so that sometimes can be a little bit awkward if from time to time it happens that there may be a situation where, the interests of one stream and the broader interests of the association are in conflict. If that happens, you are expected to, your duty is to put the interests of the whole association first. And we have aussi les obligations fiduciaires de diligence, de loyauté et d'obéissance, diligence, loyalty, and obedience. You have to act with honesty and good faith, and to show due diligence in the exercise of your functions. So, all the sort of common sense things. We are a governance and oversight group. That's our function. We are a working board, but we are not a the business, the work of the association should mostly be carried out by the staff, except in areas where we have volunteer committees and certain agreed duties. So the new Article 8 of the Constitution, which spells out the role of the directly elected president after we made the full-time presidency pilot a permanent part of our governance structure. EXCOM is the one who establishes the terms of reference for the president on a regular basis. It's not really specified, but mine were done last year when I was elected, and each year we look at them and check that they're still in. That they still apply. The president establishes objectives and evaluation criteria for the general manager's annual performance review, which is done by the president with input from initially generally from the EXCOM officers, so executive vice president, treasurer, and director of communications. But depending what's going on, of course, input from whoever might be working on a file, say. The EXCOM votes on the recommended rating and the associated bonus at an in-camera session for the general manager. And then the general manager manages all the staff, with the exception of anyone who is unless it's otherwise designated by the EXCOM. So in this current case, the advocacy and stakeholder relations officer reports directly to me, because my function is in my main principal duties are strategic planning, outreach and engagement, and so on. And so it just made a lot more sense for him to report directly to me and be evaluated by me. But theoretically, there could be others. However, otherwise, the EXCOM does not have a direct management role in the staff with the staff, does not instruct the staff. If anybody wants anything done, you generally talk to me, and I talk to Bert, although if there is something going on where you're working directly, talk to Bert, but Bert is the one who is responsible for the day-to-day management. Now, that said, coming back to the fiduciary duty, if in cases where, for example, we ever saw that there were major things that were not getting done, at that point, then it would be my responsibility under instruction of the executive committee to make sure that those things got done. So, sometimes you hear of conflicts between boards and, staff, say, of nonprofits or associations, where they're saying, well, you're micromanaging us, you're too much in the weeds. And that does tend to happen sometimes, because understanding that difference between governance and oversight and direct day-to-day management is sometimes a little bit difficult. But whenever I hear those stories, I often, what I want to know is, well, are things not getting done? Because, governance and oversight means making sure things get done. And if they're not getting done, then you do have to step in directly. And you may have to, as a group, you could theoretically have to get involved in direct management. So we have a strategic plan. According to the new constitution, leading strategic planning of the organization is the direct responsibility of the president. This current strategic plan that we're working with was adopted by the AGM in October 2019. In October 2019, we authorized a strategic plan to happen. So we did a strategic review. We adopted the results of the strategic review, and then we adopted the plan that guides us from 2021 to 2023. The executive committee supervises me in the execution and follow-up and evaluation of the strategic plan, as well as in the process that we're going to have to start to develop a new strategic plan for presentation to the members at the AGM in 2024. The executive committee is also responsible for approving the draft budget that the general manager recommends, approving which sets out funds for big projects, etc. And the executive committee also reviews the quarterly, the financial statements, and make sure that the executive committee makes sure that the organization is following all of its policies. But the budget at that level, it's budgeting as strategic planning, really, rather than day-to-day budgeting. The treasurer is the one, and the finance committee, which is made up of me, the executive vice president, the treasurer, with our finance officer and the general manager. They're the ones who really look at the day-to-day stuff. The budget operations for the executive committee are at the sort of more strategic level, looking at whether, we're putting money in the right place, whether big projects are properly funded, and so on, and less about the day-to-day, Pam, why did you claim for parking downtown on XYZ day? That's at the level of the treasurer and so on. We have a number of, I sort of got into it, officers, committees, and task forces. So the president is directly elected by the membership, but then executive committee elects from among its members an executive vice president, a treasurer, and director of communications. The Constitution has, I should mention that the only one of these that has a requirement in the Constitution is the executive vice president, who has to be based within reasonable daily commuting distance of Ottawa, of the PAFSO office, in order to be able to stand in for the president if if needed. All the others, just like all the other committees of all the other EXCOM positions, can be elected from remotely, can serve remotely, but need to recognize the timing of meetings and so on. We have two standing committees in the Constitution: the Collective Bargaining Committee that deals with negotiations and other things related to the FS collective agreement, the contract itself. And then the Professional Committee is responsible for issues related to the Foreign Service as a profession, including professional development, training. And right now, the big sub-project of the Professional Committee is the PAFSO Indigenous Mentorship Initiative, which is a really interesting project helping us to, attract and interest Indigenous students in joining the Foreign Service and match them up with serving Foreign Service officers for some advice and, one-on-one consultation about what they might want to do in order to encourage this underrepresented group to think about Foreign Service careers. Other issues that we're working on, we do have a standing finance committee. We have a staff relations committee, which is responsible for relations with the PAFSO staff. So when the PAFSO staff collective agreement comes due, the staff relations committee will be responsible. They'll form the negotiating team that will work on that contract. They would also handle any situations, say, where, there was a major conflict with the office. They would support the general manager and try to sort things out. There's a governance committee which is responsible for making sure that we are we are doing everything that we're supposed to be doing as an association, following our own policies. That would hear any concerns about conflict of interest, any violations of the code of conduct, anything like that. We have a communications committee. We have an anti-racism committee. Right now we have what we call human resources committee, which deals with all the issues that are of interest to Foreign Service officers that don't fall under the collective agreement or the FSDs. So things like staffing, where we really kind of have to rely on advocacy and persuasion because we don't necessarily have hard mechanisms to encourage the employer to do what we want. We have to try to make our case and persuade them. So the HR committee looks at those issues. Right now, they're looking at a range of issues and setting some priorities. So of areas that we should tackle from an advocacy perspective. We have a Foreign Service Directives Committee, which gives guidance to our Foreign Service lead officer, and there are two representatives on the FSD committee at the National Joint Council. We're heading into triennial review, so that committee will be taking probably a bigger role in providing guidance on an ongoing basis on what's going on at the negotiating table. That committee, led with me and Paul Raven, just presented the mandate for the negotiations to the executive committee, which approved the broad mandate on what our priorities are, which I've communicated separately to everyone. And then sometimes we have task forces that deal with specific projects or issues. The one I can think of right now is we had the FSIA Integration Task Force, which we disbanded a year or so ago because it had met its goal of making sure that the FSIA were represented on the committee, that people were aware of PAFSO, all of those different things, that looking at any specific issues specific to that group that would affect maybe some of our other long-standing policies or changes of approach. And we finished that, so we don't have that task force anymore. We may at some point, create new ones. Anyone who is on PAFSO, we ask that everybody should be on at least one committee or task force, which is usually would take you about 4 or 5 hours a month. And so that, with the executive committee meetings, which are always on the third Thursday of each month at noon, adds up to, in preparation for those, adds up to probably about 7 or 8 hours a month of time commitment to join EXCOM. Here we are. Yes, sorry, I'm hopping ahead of my own slide. Yeah, those take place. The formal executive committee meetings are 8 times a year on the third Thursday of each month, 12 to roughly 2 p.m. We also have what we call COW meetings in March, May, July, and December, and a strategic planning session in January. And those are not official EXCOM meetings, but they take place at the same time. So basically it's simple, keep your calendar free that time if you're on EXCOM. We usually have a preparation meeting a week before the official EXCOM meetings so that people can submit things for the agenda. We can understand what's going on. Sometimes people want to ask extra questions. They want extra background that we can't really get into in the meeting where we have to go through decisions, on quite a tight agenda, but those are optional. So, you wouldn't necessarily as an EXCOM member have to do that, have to attend all of those meetings, although, it probably wouldn't be helpful in trying to prepare for things. I see, I'm just going to pause. I've got a pause for des questions, des commentaires. Does anyone want to have any questions that they want to raise either in the chat or in the Q&A, or if you want to stick up your hand, I can answer. I know I've been kind of yakking at you with delivering a lot of information here. I'm not seeing any. So, okay, I will continue. I wanted to go through just our code of conduct. If anyone who joins EXCOM is responsible for reviewing the code of conduct and the terms of reference and acknowledging their support and understanding of the code by signing both documents and declaring any known conflicts of interest each year that you serve on EXCOM. So if you run for the EXCOM, you'll be asked to confirm your understanding and acceptance of these duties and obligations as part of the nomination process. There's a little box on the form, and there's a link to them so that you review them. And if you're standing for EXCOM, you're understood to have understood and accepted these, and then we ask everyone to reaffirm those commitments when the EXCOM reconstitutes itself after the AGM in November. We can't foresee all of the situations that might come up, but in general, we expect everyone to exercise good faith, honesty, to take into account PAFSO's mission, and also to act in accordance with our values. And in general, anyone who is a member of the executive committee has to be aware that their conduct could call the association into disrepute. You do take on a certain public role, or a public role vis-a-vis your departments and the employer, and you have to be careful about that. So sometimes people need to think about their social media presence and different things. I do have to say, just before I scare anybody, that we have never had anyone violate this code of conduct. We have never had any violations reported to the president for referral to the governance committee, or no one has reported me or any other president for a violation of the code. But if anyone were to be found in violation of the code, there could be a range of different things. The governance committee might look at this and might talk to the person and say, look, we think you should resign. This is serious. If the person refuses, or if the governance committee thinks it's particularly serious and needs to be on the record, they could take the matter to the full executive committee, where it would be decided by a majority vote. And if it were really serious, the person could be dismissed from the executive committee, and we could also say that the person was ineligible to serve for a certain length of time, proportionate to the misconduct. So, you posted bad things on on your Facebook about someone on the committee, something, or you revealed confidential information, maybe you don't get to serve on EXCOM for the next couple of election cycles. Like I say, we've never had this happen. Touch wood, I'm tapping on my desk here. But when we did our governance review in 2019 as part of the whole strategic planning thing, we got a number of recommendations from Institute on Governance, who we had consulted with on this. And one of them was, you need to have a formal code of conduct and formal terms of reference. Because if you don't, I mean, I would have thought that common sense would apply in many of these things, but, sometimes it can get dicey. I mean, people have different understandings of what's appropriate and what's not. And so, now we do have a formal mechanism for dealing with those things. One of the main things I think I mentioned, I've touched on it is, il faut respecter l'information obtenue dans l'exercice de nos fonctions. Knowing that, as executive committee, you're going to have access to information that's not accessible to the public or the broad membership. And you have to take all reasonable measures to protect that information. You can't make public commentary about the issues or the decision making at EXCOM unless it's agreed. I mean, we do at each meeting, we agree on what we're going to talk about. What did we do at this meeting? What do we tell people? Okay, we met for a couple of hours and this is what we spoke about. But we need a certain aspect of confidentiality in the discussions. And so what we don't want is somebody going out and, posting something about, well, EXCOM decided X. This person was obnoxious in pushing the decision through. I don't agree with it, and having a whole thing. Once we do things, once the committee makes the decision, it's a decision of the whole committee, and we're all bound by it. Of course, if someone feels something is unethical, then they may have grounds for their own complaint about violation of the code of ethics, and that would be a separate thing. But like I say, we have not actually seen this. The other part, some of the other fiduciary, the other duties or the other expectations are that we expect people to prepare themselves for effective decision making. So we send out a document package generally at least a week in advance, sometimes even before, in preparation for the prep meeting. We ask everyone to take the time to read it, review it, ask questions, come to the prep meeting. If you need more background, you don't understand, because, it's not allowed to attend something, vote yes on something, and then, a week later, pop up your hand and start going out in public saying, well, I decided on this and I never really understood what I was voting on. Committee members are expected to inform themselves and make sure they know what they're voting on. We also ensure everybody, we want to ensure that we're collegial and inclusive. Everyone needs to be treated with respect and dignity and free from harassment. I touched on supporting the EXCOM decisions after they're made, even if you didn't vote for it. Communicate externally with one voice. We also need, one of the new things that we added in the last year was, we ask EXCOM members to make sure that they uphold the staff collective agreement, as well as our own collective agreement. And that's things like, looking at how do you handle your overtime? Like, are you working a lot of extra hours and not claiming it? And people are seeing you do that. Well, you're a member of the executive committee. You need to uphold the collective agreement. If that's a provision, then, you need to set an example by doing that. The other issue that has come up is we had one person who didn't like the way a labor relations advisor had guided them, or had how far a labor relations advisor had taken their case. And so publicly threatened that they were going to join the executive committee and make that person's life miserable, and make sure that future decisions like that were made differently. Well, obviously you're not allowed to do that as a member of EXCOM. So I say obviously. Apparently it is something that needs to be spelled out. So inappropriately, like, anybody who thinks that they're going to be able to join EXCOM and force a certain outcome on their own case is wasting their time. That's not what EXCOM is for, what EXCOM does. I have another pause here for some questions or comments. Does anyone have any? We're at 9:32, so we're almost done. Not seeing any questions or comments, so I'll go to the next slide. So I mean, this is probably the part that that many of you came to see. So what are some of the current issues and things that we are working on executive committee that you would be able to get involved in if you were a member of the committee? Right now, my big project is the response to the Senate Standing Committee, the study on the Foreign Service and the GAC Future of Diplomacy Initiative. So we're preparing our submissions, as on these things, or submission on AIFA and our position paper on GAC Future of Diplomacy, which probably, spoiler alert, are going to be largely the same document. So there's an opportunity to get involved in that and to have more direct input on exactly what those documents will say. We're also working on a development of a formal advocacy strategy. We've hired last year an advocacy and stakeholder relations officer, I mentioned, and one of our key commitments in the strategic plan was development of a formal strategy that will help us advance some of our issues that are the ones that are not necessarily concretely part of the collective agreement or the Foreign Service directives, issues related to, the image of the association. One of the things we want to do, one of our goals is we need to establish PAFSO itself as a preeminent voice on the, serving Foreign Service officers. I mean, I was struck when I was listening to the Senate testimony, how many people were on there speaking about the FS group and how we should be recruited and whether or not there should be, there should be training, formal training and so on. And they were not FS, and I don't think they ever spoke to anybody. So they certainly didn't speak to PAFSO. So we would like to make sure that, when people want to talk about the Foreign Service, that really PAFSO should be one of the one-stop shops. We also need really to educate the public, decision makers, the political level about the role and the value of the Foreign Service and the exceptional work that all of you do. And, that's not part of collective agreement negotiations, except, in a kind of a foundational sense, but it supports those negotiations, because the more people understand that, the better, the better we're going to do. One of our key preoccupations at the moment, especially, with COVID still in the background and, with the lessons learned about what happened, is occupational health and safety. Health concerns abroad are a very big deal for all of us. It's come up at pretty much every forum. I mean, it came up in the collective agreement with the renewal of the Green Box MOU, because having that service canceled has really caused problems for a small but significant number of our members. And one of the issues with some of these health type things is, okay, it only affects a tiny number of the membership at any given moment, but it could affect any of us at any time. We all have bodies, we all have minds, we all are vulnerable. And right now, I personally believe that the protection that people receive, especially overseas, is not adequate. So that's a big preoccupation, a big issue that you could get involved in as a member of the executive committee. I mentioned the review and evaluation of the strategic plan and the preparation for the new cycle. So, setting new goals and priorities for the organization on a 3-year basis. We're still new to the strategic planning thing at PAFSO. The organization did not have a strategic plan, had never had a strategic review, did not have a strategic plan for the first 55 years of its existence. So having this one is a big deal. And, it's always going to be a sort of an iterative thing, and we're learning as we go. But definitely, the new one will incorporate some of the lessons learned, and there will be an opportunity to get involved in those. The whole issue of human resources and things like competitions, that's our human resources committee that I mentioned, and we're trying to come up with a couple, I said 3 to 5 priorities that we can look at both GAC and IRCC to make sure that we're protecting our membership's interests on those. I mean, we hear things like, there's a change of stream policy out there. Well, where is it? We know that the Future of Diplomacy initiative is going to focus on people. Well, what's that going to mean, for our members? The FSD cyclical review, I have a star beside that one, an asterisk there, because that's a particularly important thing that's going to be taking up a lot of our time going into the fall. The FSDs affect every rotational officer at one point in their career, and there's a lot of opportunity there, I think, to make our conditions of service better. So I won't go into too much detail on that, but you will have seen, we published our draft list of all of the amendments that we're proposing, and we're going to be taking that forward in the fall when the actual negotiations start. That's going to be a long process, to probably 2 years or more. And it will be led by Paul Raven, who is our FSD expert, supported by, on the actual negotiating committee, by one of our members. That it's a 2-day-a-week commitment for probably a couple of years. So odds are, if the executive committee agrees, it will be me who is the second person on that committee. We're lucky at PAFSO, we have 2, or they recognize that we're highly affected by this. We have 2 members, and often, the FS member is the only one on that committee who has actually served abroad. So it's an important role, and I think that it's something that is part of the reason that it's good to have a full-time person devoted, full-time serving foreign service officer devoted to these issues, because our staff are great. Paul is great, but they haven't lived the life. And, this is something that is a perspective that's important to bring. But, we do consult with everyone. We consult regularly with the committee, the PAFSO committee. We have a consultation committee for the FSDs. I'm also running today and this week the last of our focus groups to drill down on some of the issues that came up in the survey, because I need the perspective of different people. We're working on our reconciliation initiatives for PAFSO, the PAFSO Indigenous Mentorship Initiative, which is led by William Dunlop and is recruiting people to serve as mentors. There's some training involved. There will be there's going to be a sort of a pilot initiative set up. And we're going to do this with a few different universities and a small group of people, make sure that it works, and then roll it out, hopefully to be bigger and incorporate more people. On a toujours des problèmes avec l'usage des langues officielles. Here I am, I'm an illustrator of that. We could really use, I mentioned, we particularly interested in having people, we would like to attract more Francophone members to the executive committee. Right now we have only a couple, and we feel the lack of those voices. Also, as part of the FSDs in particular, we want to, one of the priorities that emerged from the membership survey, and that was agreed to by the EXCOM as part of the committee's mandate, is to really look at spousal support, or support for spouses. I don't want to say spousal support, because to me that I start thinking about, divorced people, and that's a whole other thing, but spousal employment, support for spouses at missions, different things like that. And so we would really like to encourage people who have lived experience of going on post, ideally as a member and as a spouse, or, as a member with a spouse, who can come and bring some of that to the executive committee. No doubt there will be more, there are more, but I just list a few of the things that you could get involved in here. And I see there is one question. If an FS is acting in an AS position, can he or she be on the board? Unfortunately, no. You have to be a member in good standing, which means basically paying dues to PAFSO. And if you are in a position belonging to another union, or if you're acting in an EX position, you are unable to serve on the executive committee. However, I mentioned this whole range of other committees. We would be very happy to have you join us, our communications committee, our professional committee, our consultation committee. Well, I think we have a couple of people from on the consultation committee already. But, if you are interested in a particular issue and you are going to be in an AS box for the next couple of years, we can still put you to work. So we would still be very happy to see you come and help us out at PAFSO. And then we'll know where you live. And when there's a vacancy on EXCOM, we will come and scoop you into it the next time around. But it's not a bad way, if you haven't been involved in EXCOM till now, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. I mean, I encourage people, if you have a particular issue that interests you, please consider coming and talking to us, and about what it is, and we can find you a spot on one of the committees and find you something to do. It's a very good way of getting experience in things that you may not get in your day-to-day, especially if you are not yet at the deputy director level. It gives exposure to negotiations, to things like, staff relation, hiring. I mean, we did an intensive selection process for our executive director, back in 2019. And, a couple of the members of the committee were not yet managers, and found it very educational that they were getting involved at a level of detail and at a level that they getting experience that they wouldn't normally get. I know of a couple people who have been promoted, FS3, even EX1, where their PAFSO experience has made a difference. And I've heard this from HR, that knowing that their PAFSO experience has made a difference and has helped them get promotion. It also, exposes you to meetings of senior management at both GAC and IRCC, if you're at IRCC, and gives you a chance to show yourself in a different light outside your day-to-day. So, I think it's a very valuable experience. And, our union, we are only as good as the people who participate in it. I mean, a union is basically a mutual aid membership-based organization. And, we need to help each other and ourselves. So, if you have an issue that you think is not being addressed, often you will hear from me saying to people, listen, if you think that this is important, talk to some people about it, do a bit of consulting, pull together, a one-pager on what this is about, what you think should happen, and we can look at it, and we'll be looking for somebody to lead it and to help us to define some priorities and move it forward. Because, we're not a huge organization. I mean, we have now 9 staff, counting me, working full-time on these issues. The addition of our advocacy and stakeholder relations officer is really helping us in terms of policy and, helping us go beyond, the sort of statutory labor relations and the rules of the FSDs and so on. But we still need, we need those eyes and ears, and we need those brains, frankly, to come in and to participate and help make things go forward. So you will see there will be an announcement coming out in the next week or so. I'm not quite sure exactly when, about the date of the annual general meeting, which will be the third Monday, I believe, in October. Sorry, I just need to check. Yes, it will be Monday, the 23rd of October at 4 p.m. And it will, in advance of that, there'll be a notice sent out so everybody can mark their calendar. That notice will also contain the formal notice of vacancies for the committee, and you will need to submit your nomination form by middle of August. I think you need to have, it specifies on the form, I think you need to have 3 members in good standing, so members who are paying dues to PAFSO nominate you. We will look and see if we have an embarrassment of riches and we have more people than positions, we may need to go to elections. So we'll do that. Elections will be done electronically, and then the winners will be presented to the annual general meeting, formally approved, and you would take your position the day after the AGM, which would be the 24th of October. So we have a lot of vacancies. We have vacancies in every stream, and we have 3 at-large positions. So there's certainly no reason, if you, whatever stream you are, we need you. We would love to have you. And like I say, in particular, if you are someone who has an interest in the spousal issues and lived experience on the spousal on those spousal issues, we would really like to have you, because that's an area we want to try to move forward. And I'm single, so I can't really, I'm kind of missing that piece myself. And also, nos collègues francophones, on a besoin de vous en particulier. So, excuse me, I'm going to stop the recording now. And thank everyone